So we're going to talk a little bit about Louise Rosenblatt's transactional theory of reading and writing and what this means. So Louise Rosenblatt, it seems like a simple idea in certain ways, but it's also kind of this very mystical, new at the time and still new to some of us now, way of looking at reading. Before Rosenblatt and before some people that she based her work on, there was this idea that language, the written word, were these kind of fixed, infallible systems of rules that were to be received by the person reading or listening. And Rosenblatt says something totally other. Ultimately, her idea is that when you're reading a piece of literature, you're actually engaging with it as if you're two people having a relationship and a conversation. So you picking up a short story to read is a conversation between you and the writer of that story and you and the story itself. And because it's a relationship, it's a living thing. And because you have agency in that as the reader, you actually bring new meaning to the piece of literature that no one else in the world except for you can bring. So this is a really exciting idea. If we start to think of reading as every time you read something, the text itself becomes new because you're experiencing it in a new way and only you can experience it the way that you can experience it, right? So that's what Louise Rosenblatt kind of brings to literature and to reading that's new. She bases this on some other theorists, John Dewey and Charles Peirce, and her work, her continuation of their ideas. Like Dewey had this idea that that there was a transaction, there was an exchange between the learner and the thing being learned, right? And then Charles Peirce had really says that language exists as a tool for us to use. And so if we use it and it exists for us and because of us, then we have agency over it, meaning that language is our tool so we can manipulate it, so that it's not a fixed system of rules that's infallible and always correct, but rather that we engage with it and we use this tool to change the world around us, and also we can change the tool, right? So Louise Rosenblatt took that work, built into that this idea of transaction or relationship between the reader and the piece of writing. When she says the word transaction, she doesn't mean an exchange of goods. She's really speaking relationally. So a mutually effective or affecting relationship between the reader and the piece of writing. Ultimately, what this means for our class as we read, and the reason I'm having you read this handout, and the reason I want you to think about this idea, is that I want you to be aware that you, whoever you are, whatever experience you bring to the table, whatever you've been through, whatever kind of day you're having, whatever way you see the world, both physically and literally and also figuratively, changes the piece of literature you're reading. And when I say it changes the piece of literature you're reading, it's not simply that your interpretation is new and different, although that's true, but rather that the language itself, the piece of writing itself, has literally no meaning outside of what you bring to it. So it's kind of lifeless and dead on the page until you pick it up and read it. So if this is true, then it means that the care we give to reading can literally change the world around us and our own world and the piece of literature you're reading. When we think of reading this way, it becomes a sort of act of kind of revolutionary co-creating. So you're creating the piece of literature that you're already reading. It was already written however many years ago, but as you read it, it comes to life again, it's reborn, and it becomes a new thing in your hands. I like to think of art as world building new realities, new possibilities for us to exist in. But I also want you to think about receiving art, right? So creation, of course, is world building and world changing, but you consuming the creation of another person through this theory of Rosenblatt's, this transactional theory, is equally as revolutionary and world changing. That is the way that I want you to think about reading as we move through the literature of this class. The last thing I want to say is on the second page of that handout, As I said in the last video, by the way, you have this both in website form and also in a Word doc form. I reformatted it because I think the Word doc is a little bit easier to read. So use whatever one works for you. On the second page of it, though, or if you're on the website scrolling all the way down, there is a picture of a man holding what looks like a kind of metal globe, a metal sort of round thing, and it is reflecting. It looks like a crystal ball, except that it's reflective. It's reflecting him back to himself, and it's reflecting also the room around him. So I want you to look at this carefully, and I want you to tell me in the discussion board, I left a question up, why you think this is the image that was chosen to accompany this information on Louise Rosenblatt. What does it mean? What does it symbolize? And why is it paired with this? And what might that mean for your understanding of reading and for our class? Thank you very much.